Namaste. Welcome to our 51st talk on the Bhagavad Gita. Now we'll begin in the 10th chapter at the first verse. Once more hear from me the supreme word which I speak to you, who are beloved with a desire for your welfare. This is something that's important, that God is not a person like us. He is a person, a Purusha. But he doesn't have all the accretions, the various bodies we have. And therefore, there are not these emotions and so on, and especially not personal, egoistic reactions. Yet, we are known to God, in God, and we are, as part of God's being, we are dear to God. We are valued by God. We are, in a sense, precious to God. Not in the often religious bed about, oh, God just loves you and you should just love God back. It's usually nonsense. How can you love someone you don't know? But God knows us and considers us beloved, dear. This is no small point to realize, because a lot of people, they like the impersonal attitude because they can be just as rotten, just as selfish, just as immoral as they want, and it won't matter because God doesn't care. What they forget is their own inner being does care and will have to suffer the evil consequences of the evil actions. There we have it. So, and he desires our welfare. Not he doesn't want our worship, though he says, worship me, but you worship him because it's beneficial for you. Think of it as a therapy. Real religion is kind of that, a therapy. It's for healing, elevating, and clarifying the consciousness. So, he says, I have a desire for your welfare. Not that you've got to believe the right thing. Don't you doubt me, the supreme God, and don't you have a wrong concept of me. That's these lying, hellish religions that do create hell on earth and ultimately demons on earth by their adherents. Though some of them are very good, most ultimately are not, because it's their nature to be negative, because their nature is untransformed. All right. Neither the multitude of gods nor the great rishis, great sages who have attained self-realization, know my origin. Well, that's easy to understand. God doesn't have any origin. But they don't know even that. In truth, I am the universal source of the gods and the great seers. Well, and of you and I as well. And frankly, every cloud of dirt that exists and every blade of grass that exists. And we should value it accordingly. You see, we're living inside God and we're relating to God all the time, nothing else. In truth, I am the universal source of the gods and the great seers. And I say, yes, and all is too. He who knows me, but knows me, not believes in me. He who knows me as birthless and beginningless, the mighty Lord of the world, he among mortals is undiluted and freed from all evils. How do we know that? It is knowable because we're a part of God. And the answer is yoga. And yoga not as an abstract idea, but practice, practice, practice. Sadhana, sadhana, sadhana. Only the yogi sadhaka will ever come to know these things. Intelligence, knowledge, non-delusion, forbearance, truthfulness, self-restraint, equanimity, happiness, suffering, birth, death, fear and fearlessness, non-injury, impartiality, contentment, tapasya, almsgiving, both good repute and ill repute. These manifold conditions of beings arise from me alone. Okay, let's take the list. Intelligence, it comes only from God. Real intelligence. There is lower intelligence of the lower mind. You can be a genius in that and be a moron as far as the higher intelligence and knowledge goes. And again, the same as with knowledge. There's dream world knowledge. When the world dissolves, that knowledge is nothing. But the higher knowledge of the higher self and of the spirit, the knowledge of the adept yogi, that stays with you forever. Non-delusion. In other words, not mistaking things at all for what they are, seeing them what they are, understanding what is harmful, what is positive, and not having to have a personal egoic reaction to it, such as, oh, that's bad, or oh, that's good, in the sense of something personal, because it doesn't come from us, it comes from God. So it isn't ours anyway. Forbearance, in other words, the ability to put up with things that are not pleasant, which includes even illness, problems of the body, but mostly annoyance from people and from your own self. Truthfulness. Truthfulness is speaking the truth as much as one understands, but it's also living truthfully, living as if we are an immortal being, living as if there is a supreme being of whom we are the part. Self-restraint. In other words, well, if I want to do it, it'd be hypocritical to not do it, wouldn't it? Have I heard that a lot? Only demons talk like that. Don't associate with demons. I'm serious. Get them out of your life. You have to control this lower thing. Equanimity. In other words, what comes, what goes, we think, but the one thing is real, and I will stay fixed on that and not let myself become unbalanced. But we'd be fools if we didn't know this is good and that is evil, this is pleasant and that is miserable, and so on. And there's certain things, it'd be nice if they weren't in our life, but well, if we can't get them out, then we don't let them affect us. Happiness, sukha, being at ease, suffering, they both. They're both dreams of God and our dreams in God. Birth, death, fear and fearlessness. These are all necessary. Fear is necessary too. Someone yells fire and you get out of the house because you don't want to burn to death. Well, that's fear. So there's healthy fear. Non-injury, not harming yourself on any level and anyone else. Impartiality, not saying, I'll put up with that because I like that person, but I'll just be right at it because I don't particularly like him or her, so I'll just not be the same. Yes. Contentment. Even if you know things could be better and you're working for things to be better, it's not because you're miserable and not because you're all anxious and feeling unhappy and unfulfilled if you don't have that further beneficial thing. Tapasya, real sadhana, and tapasya, support sadhana. It means the generation of heat. You roast the germs of ignorance and the seeds of ignorance, especially the karmic seeds. But it means that you rouse yourself up. You're not just floating along. You're certainly not asleep. You are afire because Light is coming out of you. Almsgiving, in other words, you know there are other people in the world than you. A lot of people don't, not really. And that they have needs. Just smiling at a person could be almsgiving. Just reacting to a person as though they have value and hoping that you do see them as having value. To a lot of people's hearts just need to be eased. They just need a good word, they need a kind word. And so it doesn't have to be some great thing that shakes the cosmos. Also, you give physically, monetarily, to charities and so on, and help people out in various ways. Giving somebody a ride when they need one, that's almsgiving also. Treating other people as though they're real. I've known a lot of people that thought everybody was just an idea in their head, and they alone were the only person who was really here. And they lived accordingly, sadly to say. Both good repute and ill repute, whether people think well of you or they don't, whether they speak well of you or ill of you, these manifold conditions of beings, in other words, they only happen to relative beings, arise from me alone. So even those things, you just let them go. I think I mentioned when the town liar decided to be telling lies about me when I was in high school. Uh, I didn't care. I knew he was a fool, and actually the whole town knew he was a fool. So, but if they'd all believed it, so what? They wouldn't come burn down the house I was in. So you ignore this stuff. In the past, the ancient seven great rishis and four manus, from whom have sprung these earthly beings, originated from me, born of my mind. In other words, they weren't created or manifested in the ordinary way. They just suddenly came forth and were present in the creation. The seven rishis are the great seven beings who were involved in, you could say they were the foremen of the process of creation. They actually oversaw it, they administered it, they intervened in it, and they directed it. Because, see, there's a hierarchy in everything. So we say, well, it all comes from the one God, but the building blocks came from the one God, but there were a lot of contractors and builders who put it all together. And these seven great sages, who were the most realized beings from the previous creation cycle, they were involved in it. So four manus were four great beings who brought forth and guided the development of the human race. The first humans were those that had just come up from the highest animal level. So they weren't very smart. They didn't really understand a lot. And so these great beings, who were really spirits, but they could show themselves to the humans, they guided them the way you even guide an infant. Infants have to learn to do some things. They have to learn to eat, for example. And so these manus, those from whom humans, manusha, mankind comes. Manusha, however, I mean, manusha means mind. Manava is someone who has a mind. Sorry, I'm getting my Sanskrit um, mingled. And that's what then, you're not a human if your mind is not operative. And you're not fully a human if your mind is not fully operative. Therefore, Arjuna, become a yogi. All right, here we go. In the past, the ancient seven great rishis and four manus, from whom have sprung these earthly beings, originated from me, born of my mind. Okay, and they just came forth. They weren't new baby souls. They had to learn and go. They had come to the highest level of evolution in the previous creation. He who knows in truth this my manifested glory and power is united with me. Okay? You really know it in truth because you and I were there. We just don't remember it. We were there perhaps kind of asleep and dreaming, but well, we're asleep and dreaming right now, though on a different level. So he who knows in truth this my manifested glory and power, an intuition of it is often satisfactory. You don't have to have some great visions of the world before the world. But he who knows in truth this is united with me by unwavering yoga. We come back to it always. If you're a yogi, you're in the picture. If you're not a yogi, you're out of the picture. Doesn't mean God likes or dislikes you. It means you've chosen. And of course, there are those that don't yet know about yoga, but that's because they're like a child. They're not ready to go to school. But you and I are ready to go to school. And it's unwavering yoga. It isn't fits and starts. Sometimes I do. Sometimes oh no. Sometimes I get so busy. Sometimes I don't feel good. Sometimes I'm so out of sorts. I think, well, if I sit to meditate, I'll just think about what's annoying me. That's a way a demon talks. That's not a way a deva talks. A being of light. If you're not a being of light, where are you going to make it with any of this? I mean, there are some people who should just quit and do their job as best they can. Of this, there is no doubt. In other words, that's just the way it is. I am the origin of all. From me, everything proceeds. That is, we see the divine hand in everything. Thinking thus, the wise, endowed with meditation, worship me. Only the yogi worships God. And they don't worship God by saying, oh, God, you're great, you're wonderful, oh, you're merciful, thank you for this, thank you for that. Blah, blah, blah. No. Worship, there's two things. First of all, the very English word. Worship comes from the English expression, a word no longer used by us, worthship. It means acknowledging the worth of something. The word is prosevki, to draw near to in Greek. And it's what it means. In other words, going toward God and entering God and worshiping God as a part of his own being and living in God. That is the real worship. That is the yajna. That is the sacrifice. That is the offering. Our own consciousness, our own being. And you know what that does? It doesn't make us fade into God and get lost like a wave in the sea. It makes us more real, more true, and more existent in consciousness than we've ever been before. If you want to really live, not run around like a fool. When I grew up, they say like a chicken with his head chopped off. I hope many of you have never seen that phenomenon. I have, I'm sorry to say. But they flop and flop and flop, and their head is gone. I mean, the body moves, but there's nothing they're even experiencing it. And a lot of people are like that. The great Christian theologian Origen said, many people are just somas, their bodies. They're not even minds, much less spirits. So, with minds and lives intent on me, the life is intent. The way we live our life. So it is Godward. Guru Nanak used this expression in the Granth Sahib, or in the hymns of the Granth Sahib, which is a beautiful word in his hymns. He speaks of the Godwards. So the life is lived as though there is a God, not just the thoughts. If you believe something, you act on it. Again, if someone yells fire and you believe it, you get out of the building. If someone yells fire and you don't believe it, you don't get out of the building. So your life is your profession of your whole spiritual philosophy, not just your material ideas. This is so important to realize. If it isn't in your life, it isn't there at all. Forgive me, I want to make a mark here so I won't keep losing my spot. I think I've mentioned one time I was in a restaurant, a vegetarian restaurant, by the way, and a man just came walking over to me and said, "You're a yogi, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Yes, I can always tell yogis. There's a light around them." He wasn't a nut at all. In fact, he was actually a great researcher uh, who had just come back from the University of Texas, where he'd been doing some work for the university there. But this is the fact. So we live in God's light, and we discover it is our light. And speaking of me constantly, now there are people that are fanatical and they think they can't even talk about the practical way to defrost a refrigerator because that would be worldly. But that isn't it. Those who are conscious realize everything they speak about happens to be God and relates to our life, the very purpose of which is the realization of God. So they know it and they see the divine in it. They don't just, for example, look at nature and say, "Oh, how beautiful, it just moves me." They know they're seeing God's script saying, "I'm here, I'm behind this. Look for me." And speaking of me constantly, that too, there are the people they think, well, if you're really religious, you keep your mouth shut, you won't bother other people with it. Well, you won't preach to them, you won't pester them, of course. Question is, well, what are you doing with them? But there are sometimes you have to realize where you go, where you don't, and who you speak to and who you don't speak to. So uh, they speak of me constantly. In other words, why go to a place where you can't speak about God, where you can't speak about spiritual life? You see? Is that a place where you belong? They are content and rejoice in me. Those who experience it knows. The Yogananda even said to music the words, "He who knows, knows. None else knows." This is the yogi's secret. To them, the constantly steadfast, they're not on fire for God now and then, oh, they cool off and then it goes back and forth and back and forth. No. To the constantly steadfast, in a sense, they have, there's actually a Greek prayer, a Greek Christian, Eastern Christian prayer that says, "Nail me down with the love of thee." It has to be that intense. The constantly steadfast, worshiping me with affection, with liking, not like, "Oh, mighty God, I'm honoring you, otherwise you'll kill me, or otherwise you won't give me what I want." No, no, no. You go to God because that's your nature and you like God. Saint Teresa of Avila, I may have mentioned before, but I like the story. Saint Teresa of Avila was very ill and felt terrible, and she, in those early days, especially before modern medicine, believe me, oftentimes by the time you were 40 years old, you were old, worn, and sick. So anyway, she was old, worn, and sick, and was going to another place where she was planning to start another convent. And it was winter time, They came to a river. The water, of course, was freezing cold. And the cart, and remember, these were primitive kind of vehicles. So the cart went down into the water and turned over and dumped her right on the water, right up to her neck in the freezing water. And she said, "Oh God, why? Why do you do this to me?" People that don't love God and people that do love God both talk to God, but it's a whole different platform they're coming from. And so she says this to God: "God, why would you do this to me?" And God spoke to her and said, "I always treat my friends this way." And she said, "Well, no wonder you have so few." Because that's true. You see, when you find really good ore, silver ore, gold, or iron, when you find it, when you find the ore, you refine it and you get the molten metal, which is what you're after, separated from the rock and these other things. But it takes great heat and great pressure. And then you get the separation. Separative wheat from the chaff is also a good example, but that's very gentle. But the blast furnace thing is not. But you get pure gold out of it. Therefore, the wise, they say, "All right, God, blast away. I'm not going to budge until you and I are one." So those who then are steadfast, they worship. To them, I bestow the Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of intelligence. He doesn't say Bhakti Yoga. He doesn't say Karma Yoga. He doesn't say Raja Yoga. He says Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of enlightenment, the yoga of the enlightened mind, the higher mind, the highest mind, the enlightened consciousness by which they come to me, and there's no other way to go. The Protestants have a little ditty that says, "Walk in the light, the beautiful light, down in the something, where all is so bright, walking with Jesus by day and by night, Jesus is the light of the world." Well, any fool can, in fact, a fool had to make that ditty up, and any fool can keep repeating it. But that is the truth. In the light, you go to the light. The Eastern Christians, the St. Thomas Christians, sing a song at the beginning of their worship that says, "By thy light we see the light, O Jesus full of light. By thy light enlighten us, make us light also." God is light. You, great master, became light. Bless us to become light as well. Out of compassion for them, I abiding in their own selves, so there's no way else to find God. Destroy the darkness born of ignorance by the shining lamp of knowledge, jnana. Jnana alone, getting tears in your ears and feeling so devotional and so on, is just egoic delusion. You've got to know, and you can't know if you don't wake up. In fact, there's a section like this in one of the Upanishads. There are these great philosophers. They meet, they discuss certain things. And then there is one who asks this one master teacher, "Well, explain to me a little further," and so on. He says, "Well, then you come with me." So they walk along, and right laying on the ground in a beautiful white robe, there's this man lying there asleep. They walk up, and the master teacher says, "O great radiant one, O divine Soma, O supreme self, O glorious Atma, please arise." And he just keeps on sleeping. So literally, he kicks him. And the man wakes up and gets up and stands up and walks on. And that's the lesson. Wake up. Wake up. And we often think, oh, if I could just really meet a great guru, if I could meet a great sage, if I could meet. Well, what if he slaps you and says, wake up? Do you think you'll like it? You see? There. Yes. Let me tell again the story I have told before about Sri Narayan Das, a wonderful and great man who lived in New Delhi and was the administrator of several temples and ashrams, though himself a grahasta. And he was a perfect example of what a yogi should be and what a really good person should be. Well, he told me that he got this firm in his mind, well, I'm not really knowing God, which was realistic, and thank heaven he acknowledged it. So he thought the next time Ma Nandamai comes through, I'm going to ask her how I can know God and tell her I want to know God. So Ma was passing in a short time through Delhi, and the train would stop there. So he went, and Ma was there. She had actually gotten off the train and was just there walking. So when she came by him, he put his hands together and said, Ma. She stopped and said, yes. He said, I want to know God. He said, Ma smiled, put her hand to one side and said, do you really want to see God and know God? He said, I knew if I said yes, she'd say, take sannyas. So I put my hands together and said, oh no, Ma, I don't want to know God. And she laughed and she kept on walking. She laughed. She didn't say, oh, let's see, you failed the test, my child. No. Because Ma knew. If Ma didn't know, there was no one in the world who would know and would understand. Therefore, the shining lamp of knowledge, and I have gone 12 minutes beyond our allotted time because it's such a great subject, forgive me. But anyway, so it is. And I therefore should perhaps say, namaste, namaste,